friends, welcome back to my classroom. Today we're going to talk about adjectives that are comparison and superlative. I'll explain. Are you ready? I'm going to make sure that you understand the meanings of these words before we start our lesson. Do you remember or do you know what an adjective does? There's a longer definition on the screen, but basically, an adjective just describes a noun or a pronoun. Now we need to talk about what comparison and superlative means. Those are big words. I'm going to help you understand though. Comparison is when we identify the differences or the similarities between two things. Let's look at the difference between these two pairs and compare them. This one is bigger than that one. Superlative describes three or more words by comparing which is the highest and which is the least. I know this sounds confusing. I promise I'm going to help you understand. As you can see in this comparison between the pairs, there are three of them, and we decide which one of them is the biggest pair. There are a few more rules you need to know to use comparison and superlative correctly. If a word is only one syllable and ends in a consonant, you will add either ER or EST. For example, the word dark becomes darker or darkest. If a word is one syllable but ends with an E, you only add an R or an ST at the end. For example, the word wise becomes wiser or wisest. If a word ends with a vowel and a consonant, you will double the consonant and add either ER or EST. If we follow the rule, the word thin becomes thinner or thinnest. If a word has two syllables and ends with a Y, you change the Y to an I and add ER or EST. An example of this is the word busy. It becomes busier or busiest. If a word has three or more syllables, you don't add anything to the end. You either add more or most before the word. Because creative has three syllables, you would use more creative or most creative. There are also some adjectives that are superlative in comparison that don't follow any rules at all. For example, good, better, best, bad, worse, worst, and much, more, and most. So now let's look at these examples. There are only two pairs, and so one is big and the other is bigger. What happens if you add a third pair? Well, then you use the superlative. So the pair is big, bigger, or biggest. Now it's time for you to decide if it is comparison or superlative. There are two deer running across the screen. Which one is correct? The deer is the fastest or that deer is faster? So the answer is that deer is faster. We use faster because we're only comparing two deer. And it's a one-syllable word, so we add an ER. What happens if we add a third deer? Exactly right. One of those deer is the fastest. We use the superlative because there are more than two deer. Listen to this sentence and look at the screen. The blue building is the tallest building. Is tallest comparison or superlative? That's exactly right. It's superlative because we are comparing more than two buildings. What happens if we remove one of the buildings? If we do that, we use the comparison word taller because there are only two buildings now. Let's look at the word happy. Based on the picture, would you use the comparison or the superlative form? You're going to use the comparison form because clearly one of the two girls is happier than the other. Are you ready to practice all that you have learned on your own? Listen carefully to the sentence and look at the picture. One of these planets is the largest. Is largest comparison or superlative? Yes, largest is superlative because there are more than two planets in the picture. Look at this picture and listen to this question. Which dessert tastes sweeter? Is it comparison or superlative? Yes, sweeter is the comparison form of the word sweet because there are only two desserts on the screen. Which dress is longer? Look at the word longer. Is it comparison or superlative? Yes, we use the comparison form of the word long because there are only two dresses. We're going to practice a little more. Make sure that you use the rules that you've already learned to answer the questions. What is the superlative form of the word silly? That's exactly right. The superlative form of silly is silliest. We changed the Y to an I and added EST. What is the superlative form of the word dark? Yes, the superlative is darkest. We're comparing more than two things. What is the comparison form of the word soft? Softer is the comparison form of the word soft. In this example, there are only two kittens. Carefully read the sentence that is on the screen. Which form of the word kind would we use? Superlative or comparison? Yes, we would use kinder. My sister is kinder than my brother. We use the comparison because we're comparing only two things. You did so well. This is not an easy skill to learn. Don't be discouraged if it takes you some practice. If you liked this video or you learned something, click the thumbs up and subscribe to come back to my classroom again.